Hey everyone, welcome to another video. My name is Elric, and in this video we are going to create 663 procedures. A lot of procedures. I'm going to show you 3 procedures that will create the other 660. These procedures are versioning procedures. Instead of updating views, inserting into views, and deleting from views, we are actually going to be using procedures. We have this cursor system, and using these procedures will make sure that the data makes it to its appropriate table and in the history archive databases and their respective tables if necessary. So I hope you enjoy, and I will see you soon. Alrighty, so I created 3 procedures, system object process, versioning, insert, update, and delete right here. And I've opened up the insert one because all of these are variations on the same theme. Now, usually I add like an exec statement in my code, but this time I have chosen to create a new script that just does my drop if exists to speed up the process. I'll execute this, then I'll execute the next one. The parameters that I needed for building the procedure itself is pretty simple. Just the declare portion, the insert portion, and the columns for the insert, like insert into table, what are those items? And then the dataset type ID to figure out, am I going to be adding the history chunk to this, or if it's already a history archive snapshot table, we don't need this extra check. And the family IDs and dataset types to get to that specific flag. You know, should we add this history or not, which is why I have is main table flag. So besides the drop if exists procedure, the insert code is very simple. I do use a table variable. I hate using table variables because it's a hit on temp, but because of this article, scope identity and identity are not reliable from Microsoft. So the only 100% way to do this, and we are in a 100% system, is to use a table variable. Inside of all my insert procedures, pretty basic stuff. This portion, actually all of this data, is for the history piece. I did hard code the primary key value because it's an output variable here, and we're going to use it in other areas. And here's one of the lists that we're going to be creating, declare parameters. There's a function that we will be calling. We're going to send it the dataset name and the key name history, and it'll tell us whether or not to record history. Right now, this is always returning a 1. Sometime later, we will attach it to definitions, but we don't need to do that immediately. Let's have everything record history. The insert statement's pretty simple. We're going to insert the data using another generated list, output the values into our table, and get the value from the table to return it. That's why we have an output. And the insert parameters are essentially a repeat on these declare parameters, but without the UDT. And then lastly, we have the history injection. If this is a main table, we will want to inject this code. If it's not, if it is already a history table, archive, or snapshot table, we're not going to inject this code. It'll just be blank. So if the history flag is true, we're going to get information about the data set. We're going to get the current timestamp. We're going to get the JSON for what was just entered in. This primary key would be this value right here. And then we're going to call the procedure that we're also going to be creating to store that history with an insert action. So the code itself is pretty simple, getting the dataset name for the dataset ID that's incoming, trimming off TBL ref, TBL rel, TBL whatever, to get what I like to call a short name, which is the subject name plus the type if it exists. Then we're going to go in and find the primary key, and then we're going to build our data point list. So for the parameters, it's pretty easy. Self-concatenation, add a return character, then add @ use our transform function from the view builder, add a space, and then the data point type name, and then a comma. For the insert list, almost the same thing. Return the transformed name and a comma. No @ this time. And then basically the inverse of that, self-concatenating parameters, a new line, an at, and the transformed column. So this will be our procedure. This will be our insert into list, and this will be the values that are actually being inserted. So I don't normally use joins or cross applies or anything, but in this case, it's a very easy way to do this. Making sure that we're not getting the primary key or unassigned values, we can generate the data point list where the data point type ID is in our view definition that we made way back in the views, using the same system relationship and everything. So this will limit the columns that we're trying to build off of based on the columns available in the view. So it really works on itself. So now we're going to check if the table belongs to our unassigned, if it's not a archive history or snapshot table. And if it does, or if it does belong to our main data set, we're going to mark this flag, because this flag is going to let us inject the history code. After that, it's just replacing all of the data and executing it, making sure that we remove trailing commas when necessary. So the update code is very, very similar. We still have the declare parameters, but we get to remove one set of parameters. All of this information looks the same. We have update columns because an update is formatted differently, and we have our same history code after. So you think about it as we inserted the data and then we grabbed the data for our history. Now we're going to update the data and grab that current record for history. So same kind of thing in the history flag, almost identical, except for this is now changed to update instead of insert. Same code, same code. Instead of 3 pieces here, we only have one where we're, using the set function. So set column name equals parameter. And everything else is the same. Oh, we're just kind of moving update all over the place. So instead of insert view, it's now an update view. Checking to see if it's a main table, injecting the code if it is, and doing our replaces, dropping the procedure and recreating the procedure. Now delete is a little different because I know delete only contains 2 columns. So instead of trying to build this list, I know that delete will always contain the tenant and the ID. So we do a replacement here instead of the generated lists. And the other piece is we have to add the same key, instead of history, we add an archived one. Archived ID, archive flag. We call the same procedure to get the history flag, but we send it an archive key name. And because of how delete works, we want to make sure that we're putting our data in history and archive before we delete it. So we're going to put the code above instead of below. So that's a big change. Once again, history is the same, except for now we have delete. Oh. And the archive piece just doesn't have the history action, and we change all the words history to archive, get the same data, because we could want to put something in history and not archive it, and we could want to archive something and not put it in history. So it's good that we separate these two for every single case that we may have. Same kind of code, same everything. Actually, not same everything. I was able to take the data point select statement out completely because we don't need it. We are just doing the replacement and execution. So, creating those 3 procedures allows us to create the other 660 procedures. What we want to do first, because this code is using the versioning things for the history and archive, we want to make sure that we run our snapshot history and archive procedures first. So we just got to execute that. Boom. Hit refresh, And we have hundreds of procedures ready to go for archive history and snapshot. And then after we run that, we will want to run the main tables. So now they will recognize that the other ones exist, that the other history and archive procedures exist. And then we have all of our procedures that we will update, insert, and delete data from our subjects. So that is it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. Remember, like this video and YouTube will recommend it to users in our industry, and subscribe to support me. Thank you once again and have a good one.